Hello everyone and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel. We continue with Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. We are in chapter 49. This is the conclusion, 49e. This is obviously about Purim, as last few classes have been and as the upcoming classes will be. This one is called We Don't Weep for the Wicked. Halu et Adonai kol goim shabechu kol haomim ki gavar alenu chasdo ve'emet Adonai le'olam hallelujah. Now, here's a little inside look, like we said last week, into what's going down with all these parties, the festivities, right? We're kind of continuing. Rabbi Shimon says, the customs of the kings of Medo-Persia was that while they were eating and drinking, they would bring out their wives, completely naked, and have them play around and dance before them in order to show off their beauty. So, yeah, I guess Hollywood, the new self-proclaimed Babylon, took a page out of that book, huh? All right. Because ain't no party like a Medo-Persian party. Or so they would say. When the wine entered the heart of Achashverosh, he desired to do this to Vashti, his wife, and she was the daughter of kings, says Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. So like we said last week, she was the daughter of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, who was killed the very night he paraded the temple vessels before his guests. So during the Medo-Persian uprising that night, during that commotion, she ran into her father's room and jumped into his arms. But in fact, her father was already murdered, and she had accidentally jumped into the arms of Darius the Mede, the new king of Babylon. He later married her to his grandson or the stable boy of his grandson. And he also had a reputation. We're talking about Achashverosh. He had a reputation of being kind of like a buffoon. And Vashti did not take upon herself to do as her husband had commanded her to do, that she should come and dance naked before the guests. She sent him a message saying, "You drunken fool of a man, if I come before all, and they see that I am ugly," let's say they say, "Ugh, she's not attractive," right? "They will mock you at your own table. And if they see that I am beautiful, perhaps one of your ministers, they will desire me, and then they will kill you while you're drunk, you dummy." Achashverosh knew that what she said was true. He was the ruler of the most powerful kingdom at the time. A ruler needs to be dignified and not taking shots with the boys, getting all sloppy drunk like, is kind of like what she told him. But you could tell she despised him from the beginning. So the fact that he would publicly command his queen, the one who all would bow to and fear on a day-to-day basis, now be paraded around naked and forced to dance before all the dignitaries and many of the people as well, was clearly a poor choice. People would lose even more respect for him, and they would never respect her again, right? Because just like the king himself would get sloshed with wine, who would really blame any one of his dignitaries and ministers if they use the same excuse of wine to kill the king and take his wife? Hey, it's 6 months of who knows what's going on, right? And she speaks from experience, as her father was murdered by his grandfather or grandfather of the kingdom that he was running before, and crowned himself king later on. And we will see this. Furthermore, our sages discuss that he was really despised among all his own people. Hence the name Achash Verosh. Woe my head. Achash, to feel, Barosh, right? Anyone who thought of him would, this guy, like that, Achashverosh. That's why his name was Achashverosh. So, what did he do after he heard her wise counsel? He had no choice but to, as our text says, have her killed. So you see, there was no way out of it for him. And that was the only way that he could have saved face, since all this was done publicly and in poor taste. If he had accepted his wife's refusal, it would show him as weak and subservient to his wife, making him an easy target, an even easier target. If she had come out, one of two things would have happened. She would be considered ugly, like we said, to which the king would be mocked at his own table, thereby showing his people's lack of respect, making him a target. And if she would have been desired, he would have been killed on her account. So it was a lose-lose situation. There was only one thing left to do, right? So our sages say he made a calculated decision, even in his drunken state, and he traded her life for his, having her killed. When the wine left his heart, when he sobered up, that is, meaning at the end of the 180-day festivities, he called for his wife, but she could not be found. This is not to say that he forgot what happened, but rather, when he was lucid, he remembered what had transpired and cried out for her. Not like, Vashti, Vashti, has anyone seen my wife? More like, Vashti, stop yelling. Kind of that situation. Like he remembered and he's like, oh man, all right. And his minister, this is fascinating, just pay attention now. And his minister had told him of the sentence that he had sentenced her, and he began to cry for what he did. He says, well, dude, you had her killed. Now, you may be feeling bad for Vashti. You may identify with her as a woman being held down by the patriarchy, but let me tell you something. That would be like you shedding a tear for Adolf if he was to be gassed to death. Okay? They are equivalent. Did you weep when the Egyptians drowned in the water after they drowned your kids, among so many other things? No. Remember the title verse, okay? We don't weep for the wicked. You need to know that God works measure for measure. Midah keneged midah. Always. The key word being measure. This is perfect. Now, let's see why as our text continues. And why was this sentence decreed upon her? You notice language? The wording in Hebrew is Velama nigzera alea gzera zo. It didn't say why did he, meaning Achashverosh, decree this sentence, but rather why it was decreed upon her. And we, as students of the Torah, can already understand from the language that this was decreed from heaven. So why? Because she would bring out the daughters of Israel and strip them naked, degrading them and making them work on Shabbat in front of everyone. And therefore it was decreed upon her that on Shabbat she would be slaughtered naked publicly. As said in Esther 2:1, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, meaning not disobeyed him, and what she had done, what she did to the Jews, and what had been decreed upon her. Not what he decreed, what had been decreed upon her. All this through the text that's speaking directly to us. Even the plain text says that it was decreed upon her. And so again, we don't weep for the wicked. Rabbi Zachariah says, merit is transferred by one who is worthy, and so Daniel, the righteous, the worthy, right, who was memuchan, Esther merited to the kingdom, to receive the kingdom. So we got questions and questions, so many questions, no problem. Merit is transferred by one who is worthy. Think of it as like an electric current, if you can handle it, okay? And so Daniel was memuchan, says our text. So we see this name appear in Megillat Esther, right? Especially in the beginning of there several times. But this person is essentially unknown. Who is this Memuchan guy? However, there are opinions saying that Memuchan was Haman. And if you could read it over there, it's like, oh, okay, so that's Haman. You wouldn't be like, no, it's not. But here, Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer says that it's Daniel. So we're going to go with that. Welcome to Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, where we broaden our horizons, challenge the status quo, and give you many other options to think about. So here, Memuchan is Daniel. And this, of course, this fits our timeline, as he was around for everything that had transpired from the Babylonian exile to the Medo-Persian exile in the kingdoms over there to the rebuilding of the Second Temple. Daniel was around to see all that stuff. And like we've said before, he and Mordechai and some of the other greatest of that generation were among the 2 to 4% of the Jews that returned to Israel upon Cyrus' decree to build the Second Temple. But they also saw in Ruach HaKodesh that trouble was afoot in Shushan. So that's why they went back there. Mordechai and Daniel and some of the others, they went back there to handle it. And handle it they did. So you see, Throughout history, and particularly throughout the book of Esther, we see God strategically placing his people in the right place at the right time. The king just so happened to wake up in the middle of the night, and he just so happened to be bored and wanted to read through the book of records, and his eyes just so happened to have landed on the incident where Mordecai, who just so happened to be sitting right in the right place at the right time, overhear two of the king's loyal servants plotting to kill him. So many happenstances at some point, right? If you didn't know that this all comes from God, if you would give this book to anybody who is not very sympathetic to the Jews, I mean, you'd make a movie about the Jews' conspiracy to kill the king and seize power. So many coincidences. The Jews had to have, the Zionists, right? The Jews had to have something to do with it. We see very clearly, this is how God works. You don't need the heavens to open up. It's every day, all the time. You just need to open your eyes and realize that. Miracles happen every single day. I'm still waiting for the church to come up with the story that Mordecai and Esther plotted to kill the king and seize power all along, right? Why not? Let them do it. So that's why this book is so significant, because when all of them are looking to the heavens and waiting for big miracles, all of them, bells and whistles and mind-blowing supernatural events, it will be the simple Jew who will see. And that's usually how God gives his messages. 1 Kings 19, 11, 12. And he said, go out and stand in the mountain before the Lord. Behold, the Lord passes in a great and strong wind, splitting mountains and shattering boulders before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after all the wind, an earthquake, and not in an earthquake was the Lord. And after the earthquake, fire. Not in the fire was the Lord. And after the fire, a still small voice. Kol dmamadash. In the details, baby. The glue that holds everything together, you see. God speaks to us through the very fabric of reality and all of creation. Everything is relevant. You don't need anything supernatural. And oy vavoy to you, says the Rambam, if you wait for God's miracles without doing something on your own. You do, God will assist you, but you don't sit there and say, hey, I trust in God, it'll be okay. What are you doing about it? Our sages say that even the direction of how a blade of grass might lay on the ground, a twig falls from a tree. If it falls like this, or like this, or like this, or like that, God sends an angel to make it so, and it is very specific. Everything is on purpose. You need to understand that. It's what will help you get through what is to come. I also understand that it's difficult for common folk to comprehend what I'm saying right now, because the magnitude of the control and ownership of this world, all time, all space, all reality, all is one without separation. People cannot comprehend. So when we say, yeah, God is up there in heaven, no, all these are metaphorical for us to kind of understand roughly the structure of things, but obviously God is everywhere. Psalms 24:1. But I digress. Let's continue. It was by the merit of Daniel that Esther had received the kingdom, says our text. How so? Because he told the king, who was crying because he had his own wife killed, he said, don't cry, dry your eye. For everything that you have done to Vashti, you did according to the Torah, said Daniel to Achashverosh. What is written in the Torah regarding a Jew marrying a non-Jew? In fact, this was before the Torah was given, right? This dates back to Abraham. Hold on, I know you got questions, I'll answer. How did they handle this in the Torah, from the Torah, over the course of the 9-year story of Esther, right? This whole story wasn't 1 day or 1 year, it's 9 years. Ezra 10:1-5. And when Ezra prayed and confessed, weeping and prostrating himself before the house, a very large assemblage of Israel, men, women, and children gathered to him, for the people wept with much weeping. And Shechaniah, the son of Yechiel, and the sons of Elam, raised his voice and said to Ezra, we have betrayed our God, and we have taken in foreign wives of the peoples of the land, but now there is hope for Israel concerning this. And now let us make a covenant with our God to cast out all the wives and their offsprings by the counsel of the Lord, and those who hasten to perform the commandments of our God, and according to its law it shall be done. Rise, for the matter is incumbent upon you, and we are with you. Be strong and do. Then Ezra rose and adjourned the chiefs of the priests and the Levites and all Israel to do according to this matter, and they swore. So, we should ask the question. Here's your question, right? What does this law have to do with a non-Jew who can marry whoever they choose? Let's see what our text says. For everything that you have done to Vashti, says Daniel to Achashverosh, you did according to the Torah. And whoever fulfills the commandments of the Torah, he says to him, the Holy One, blessed be he, solidifies this person's kingdom. For this is what it is written in the Torah. In other words, okay, this is what is it written in your Torah? So he tells them the laws of we cannot marry outside, right? In other words, Jews marry Jews. This is what Daniel says. But and he's having the same questions. So what's this got to do with us? What's this got to do with the Achashverosh? Daniel says, no problem. Genesis 3:16. And to your husband will be your desire, and he will rule over you. God said this right there, okay? To the woman he said, you shall surely increase your sorrow and your pregnancy. In pain you shall bear children, and your husband will be your desire, and he will rule over you. This is a command. This is how it is, right? So two things happened here. And again, this is not a feminist, non-feminist agenda here. I'm just quoting scripture, please. Achashverosh asked his sages, his wise men, the wisest of which was likely Daniel, who served kings and kingdoms before him. He had a reputation. Everybody knew this guy. He just got out of the lion's pit and tamed them. Achashverosh was in a bad state, and he asked Daniel, what is written in the Torah regarding how Jews must be with their wives? When Daniel told him that this goes back to the days of Abraham and solidified in the Torah, for instance, in Deuteronomy 7:3-4, you shall not intermarry with them, you shall not give your daughters to their sons, and you shall not take his daughters for your son, for he will turn away your son from following me. And they will worship the gods of others, and the wrath of the Lord will be kindled against you, and he will quickly destroy you. That's why we don't intermarry, because it never ends well. Whoever does that, whoever goes outside and brings that person, usually they go away. It's not the other way around, okay? And again, even if they do come in, everybody's got to do tshuva over there. So this is what happens when Jews intermarry. They turn away from God and go after the wife. We saw it back then, we see it today. Which is why before Israel received the Ten Commandments, God wisely told Moses to first call the women and then to call the men to receive the Torah in Exodus 19:3. Moses ascended to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, so shall you say to the house of Jacob, and tell the sons of Israel, Ko tomar lebeit Yaakov, v'tagid livnei Israel. Beit Yaakov. Any Ashkenazi Jews here? Y'all heard of Beis Yaakov, right? It's a famous girls' school. Beit Yaakov is the women. Bnei Israel, the sons of Israel, are the men. God just made a separation, calling first the women to the Torah, then the men. Since it is man's nature, right, to follow the woman, as we have seen in Genesis 3:6. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and there was delight to the eyes, and the tree was desirable to make one wise. She took of the fruit, and she ate, and she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. So then let Israel follow the woman into Torah and not into sin, as Adam followed Eve into sin, right? So here, let's flip that. If man is already naturally following the woman, let her be pure and let him follow her into purity. And guess what? It worked. As our sages say, it was by the merit of righteous women that Israel were saved, and it will be by the merit of righteous women that Israel will be saved. Baruch Hashem. Still waiting for that. So, this is according to our natural inclination, how we work. But laws have been put in place to go against, or at least control or curb, our natural base instincts. That's what the laws are for. We are not animals. Which is why God told Eve, just as Daniel told Achashverosh, the reason you did according to the Torah is because God said so in Genesis 3:16, and your husband will be your desire and he will rule over you. It's a nice boost of confidence. The creator of the heavens and the earth said that the husband needs to rule over the wife. Okay. And so now why is Daniel telling him all this? You see. And since God made this law, and you have informed said law, right? You said it. It must be written in the laws of the kings of Persia, as said in Esther 1:22. And he sent letters to all the kings of the king's provinces, to every province according to its script, different languages, and to every nationality according to its language, that every man dominate in his household and speak according to the language of his nationality. In the house, man is king. That is what he's saying over here. Now, although this is legitimate, and he did ask what to do in Esther 1:15, according to the law, what shall be done to Queen Vashti, inasmuch as she did not comply with the order of the king, brought by the hand of the chamberlains. So he got the answer from Memuchan, who our text says was Daniel, in Esther 1:16-17. Then Memuchan declared before the king and the princes, not against the king alone has Vashti the queen done wrong, but against all the princes and all the peoples that are all in the king Achashverosh's provinces. For the word of the queen will spread to all the women, to make them despise their husbands in their eyes when they say King Achashverosh ordered to bring Vashti the queen before him, but she did not come. And this is according to what we read in Genesis, right? There's no conflict here. This is what is written in the Torah. But what if I told you that all this, everything he said, even though it's written in the Torah, all this was just a cover? Because really, what does Achashverosh care about what God said? He just paraded out the temple vessels. What does he care about the God of Israel? What does he care, right? Or what does he care about what's written in the Torah of the Jews? Not only regarding the laws of the Jews, but for the laws of man in Genesis 3. Mach patli, what do I care? Why? Here's what Daniel really told the king in the back room away from all the guests. You ready? I'm about to give you some inside information here. But first, who was Achashverosh according to the Midrash? Although Achashverosh was seen as an all-powerful king who killed his wife for reasons of honor, his wife's status was actually, like we said, much higher than his. Vashti had blue blood in her veins, and she was the one who gave him legitimacy to rule, since Achashverosh did not come from any royal lineage. Despite his great wealth, his previous position was as a horsekeeper for Vashti's father, Belshazzar, the king who preceded him. Achashverosh bribed the people in power to gain the crown. He was crafty, but still didn't know how to handle it. Think of like a low-level hustler who bribed enough people and just made his way to the top of the food chain. What do you do now? Just because you know how to hustle doesn't mean that you know how to run an entire empire, right? Okay, so he had a lot of enemies, and his wife could not stand him. He bribed the people in power to gain the crown, and at the same time married Vashti to consolidate his status. At first, his reign was unstable, but he struggled to maintain his position, and he sort of got it over there. After 3 years of marriage, when he felt sufficiently established on his throne, he held the famous banquet, the one that we're reading about in the Megillah of Esther. So really, why did Daniel advise Achashverosh to get rid of Vashti? Vashti was not only the daughter of Belshazzar, but also the great-granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. This shady lineage is also reflected in her attitude towards the daughters of Israel, like we said. It is said that she humiliated them, stripped them naked, and forced them to work on Shabbat on purpose. Don't shed tears now. And if that were not enough, she was the one who incited her husband, Achashverosh, to stop the construction of the temple, telling him, "My great-grandfather destroyed the temple, and you want to allow it to be rebuilt? You are destroying the labor of generations." This woman, This woman not only did what she did to the daughters of Israel, but she was directly responsible for the second temple not being built. So, what do we say? It was decreed from heaven that she be ended in the same way that she abused her power. That's how she would meet her end. Don't cry for her, Argentina. We don't weep for the wicked. All this Daniel saw through Ruach HaKodesh, but God was not done yet. Furthermore, he said, from Esther 2:2, and the king's young men, his servants said, let them seek for the king young maidens of comely appearance. It does not say all young maidens, but young maidens of comely appearance. Tovot mar'eh. I don't know if that's exact translation, but tov is good, tovot, very good, right? Mar'eh, the way they look. In the simplest terms, it means good looking, but gorgeous, beautiful, all that stuff. But for the king's standards, and specifically the most impossible standard, the best looking young maidens in all of the kingdom. Why the most impossible standard? Because Daniel knew also, through Ruach HaKodesh, that there was only one in the world who would fit this bill, and that is Esther. And it's very interesting. I don't have it with me right now, but if you actually read, if you read Midrash Rabbah, Masechet Megillah, I believe it's chapter 3, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, not Masechet Megillah, Eicha Rabbah. When Israel cries in Megillat Eicha, in the Lamentation, it says, Yetomim hayinu ve'en av, we are orphans and we have no father. God said, by what you said, I will raise from amongst you a redeemer who has no father or mother. And that is Esther. So read that there. And this is exactly what happened. So he obviously saw this in Ruach HaKodesh. He saw what was going down. So Daniel saw that this girl would be the savior and the redeemer of the Jews. And to not show any bias from his own end, saying, hey, take this kind and that kind, get all the best looking chicks in town, well, throughout the kingdom, bring him before, but he left it entirely up to Achashverosh, as said in Esther 2:4, and let the maiden who pleases the king reign instead of Vashti. In other words, who pleases the king, you get to choose. You're the big man on campus, you choose. And the matter pleased the king, because of course it did. And he did so. And so it was, when he had the privilege, Achashverosh, when he had the privilege of meeting Esther, as it was said in Esther 2:9, and the maiden pleased him, and she won his favor, and he hastened her ointments and her portions to give them to her, and the 7 maidens fitting to give her for the king's house, and he changed her and her maidens to the best portions in the house of the women. That's it. All of a sudden, you went to the top of the status over there. Her 7 maidens were all holy kosher Jewesses, and Esther was so beautiful that Achashverosh had no need to look at any other woman. He could have taken all the wives. Why just choose one, right? We're going to see why it was only Esther. Esther was beyond a doubt the most beautiful woman in the world, as said in Esther 2:15. And Esther obtained grace in the eyes of all who beheld her. Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Avichail, Mordechai's uncle, who had taken her for a daughter, came to the king, she requested nothing except what Haggai, the king's chamberlain, the guard of the women, would say, and Esther obtained grace in the eyes of all who beheld her. Anybody that looked at her. It wasn't that, oh wow, she's hot. No. Noset chen. Even the wording itself, noset, carrying grace. So not only was she beautiful outwardly, but she radiated beauty and grace because of how holy that she was. We could see women in the world today as physically beautiful as they are. There's nothing behind that. That's all there. I'm not ranking on women. This is a very specific kind. We know that. Beauty really is only skin deep. Here, the Torah is saying that she radiated it, and everyone that saw her was just completely enamored. Boom. What's going on? I don't know. The Zohar says that Esther, who was a prophetess, was a reincarnation of Sarah, Sarai Imenu. And we see a hint of it even in the text itself. After Achashverosh married Esther, he only had, before he married Esther, he only actually had 120 provinces. But because of Esther, in her merit, that's why it says that his kingdom grew to 127 provinces specifically, which is how it starts from Esther 1:1. Now it came to pass in the days of Achashverosh, he was the Achashverosh who reigned from Hod to Cush, 127 provinces. Sheva ve'esrim umea medina, 7, 20, 100. Parshat Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah from Genesis 23:1 says, and the life of Sarah was 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. 7, 20, 100, 127. The years of the life of Sarah. 127 provinces correspond to the 127 years of Sarah. They were both married. They both were the most beautiful women in the world at their time. They were both married to the most powerful men in the world at the time. And I'm not talking about Achashverosh for Esther. And they both had a direct effect of a positive outcome regarding the future of Israel. Esther 4:17. So Mordechai passed and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Genesis 21:12. And God said to Abraham, be not displeased concerning the lad and concerning your handmaid. Whatever Sarah tells you, hearken to her voice, for in Isaac will be called your seed. Now we understand what we're talking about over here, right? The Zohar states that compared to Sarah, all the women in the world looked like monkeys. This is not to take away from anyone else's beauty, but to accentuate Sarah's beauty, who was a reincarnation of who? Of Chava, Imenu, right? The mother of all living things, of Eve, the woman who was created, who was said of her that even Sarah's beauty compared to Eve's beauty, Sarah looked like a monkey, okay? Again, not to take away anything or disrespect, this is the language that they use because the difference was so extreme. And anyone who looked at Sarah, that's why Abraham, the first time he actually noticed her figure in the reflection in the water, he says, woman, we need to cover you up because if they see you, if anybody sees you, they're going to kill me, no questions asked. Same thing. And why? It wasn't only because of her physical appearance. She radiated this beauty. It comes from within. No hurt feelings here, just making a point. And Esther obtained grace in the eyes of all who beheld her. Vati Esther noset chen, like we said, be'enei kol ro'ea. She carried grace mamash as it rested upon her. The Shekhinah, you see. And she was in her rightful place as queen of the most powerful kingdom in the world at the time, savior of the Jews, redeemer of Israel. As for Vashti, what did we learn? She got exactly what was coming to her, measure for measure. And that is why we do not weep for the wicked. Thus concludes chapter 49 in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. We're at chapter 50, people. That's a big deal. There's only 54 chapters in the book, but yeah, we're definitely getting there. In any case, thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and have a Shabbat Shalom.